Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining our e-seminar today on managing study files in Excel Tech, NeuroWorks, SleepWorks software. The presentation today will be relevant to versions 6.0, 6.1, and 7.0. My name is Franco Avolio, and I am the Sleep and Neurology Education Manager with Natus Medical. I will be your host and presenter today. I want to give you an overview of what the file types and file sizes are like with respect to EEG study files and or sleep recordings. We'll be talking about how to reduce the file size if file size is an issue. That includes talking about how to reduce your sampling rate or video. We'll be talking about pruning. We'll go over some pruning operations. We'll be talking about deleting studies, archiving, purging, importing, and exporting to various formats. Let's look at a sample sleep study here. Now this could be a sleep or an EEG study. Either way, the file structure are very similar. So let's select this sample 7-hour sleep study. Go to the Info button. Down at the bottom here, where it says Study Directory, we can access the contents of this particular study by clicking on this button here. So the first thing that you'll notice is that even though you see one study record, the entire contents of a study are not stored in one file. Alright, so this is not like opening up a Microsoft Excel document where you have all of these worksheets in an Excel file, but it's all stored in one file. When you're talking about a SleepWorks or a NeuroWorks study, one study may be comprised of, if we look at the content here, look at the bottom here, it indicates that it's about 230 objects that are selected. So this one study file is comprised of 230 files. Let's sort by type so we can get an idea of what types of files are stored per study. You'll see various extensions here: ENT, EPO, EPR, ERD, ETC, SNC, STC, and then you'll see a series of video clips. The bulk of a typical study consists of the video clips that are associated with the actual study. If you scroll to the bottom here, you'll also notice a VTC file and a WAV document. If you look at the sizes of these individual files, alright, the VTC, your WAV document, fairly small. The largest size is typically stored in the ERD files. The ERD files store your data waveforms. Alright, so all of your waveform data, your signals, are stored in the ERD file. Your video files are the second largest file types that you'll see. And this is because when we are recording video, we're not just recording everything to one video file. Video is recorded in segments, and each of these segments are approximately 17 to 18 megabytes. This is how the software records the video. As far as the viewer is concerned, when the end user is looking at a study, you will not be able to tell that you're not looking at a series of segments. To you, it'll look like one continuous playback. But again, we're looking at it from behind the scenes. These files are not intended to be accessed or viewed directly. The way to interact with a study is by using your database window. But again, we're looking behind the scenes. These other file types, the ENT, the EPO, EPR, ETC, again, these files are relatively small in size, and each of these files simply contain additional information that pertains to your study. One file type will contain annotation notes. Another will store your CO2 pulse oximetry trending data. Other files will contain or store information pertaining to the video, pertaining to your waveforms, pertaining to your system's configuration, and the configuration of your study. When you interact with the study, you're not looking at all of these files. You are interacting with the study through the database window and simply by dealing with a database record. If we were to highlight all of these studies and go to File Properties, you will see that the approximate size of a 7-hour study recorded at 200 hertz and recording with high quality video, not high definition, you will see that a 7-hour study is approximately 4 gigabytes in size. This is just a rough approximation of file size, give or take a few hundred megabytes. And again, that can be affected by the sampling rate, the quality of your video, and it can be affected by whether or not you are recording on every channel from your headbox. Alright, I will close this now and return to our database window. Now if we look at a typical 8-hour study, sampling at 200 hertz with high quality video, you're looking at approximately between 4 and 5 gigabytes of data. If you want to reduce the file sizes are basically affected by two main factors. And the first factor is the sampling rate. By default, I'm going to go into our programs, XLTech, and go to NeuroWorks EEG. Alright, so this basically opens up what we call our WAVE program. Okay, and this is basically the program that allows you to view and record studies. So, in order to access the menu that I'm about to show you, you cannot have a study open. You have to access it the way I did by going to Start Programs and XLTech and selecting NeuroWorks EEG. If you go up into File, Customize, and select the Video tab, there is an Acquisition button. If I click on the Acquisition button, it takes us to our video window. I'm going to click on the Video Capture tab. And there's an option down here that says Squeeze Recorded Video. Alright, so by default, this is unchecked. By default, we display and record video on a high quality setting. If you were interested in reducing your video size during a live recording, alright, so what that means is you're recording a study. The video that you will be seeing during the live recording will be displaying at a high-quality video settings. However, it will be saved onto the study file using a compressed video scheme. Alright, you'll see high quality in live, but if you try to view the study later, you would see it in a low video quality. If you're interested in recording at low quality, you would check this. Alright, and then it's just saying, are you sure? I'm going to click yes. I'm going to click on the options button, and it brings us into this video squeeze mode window. Alright, so what it does, it gives you some options here. If we want to draw your attention to the bottom here, here it says that if you enable the video squeeze mode at the current setting, alright, so there's a spectrum here where you can drag this slider to the right or to the left. I'm just going to drag it to the left. So right now, if we pick this, it's telling us that for an 8-hour study, sampling at 200 hertz, the size of your video would be approximately 303 megabytes. So the total study size would be approximately 603 megabytes. We don't give you the ability to adjust very specific video settings. What we've done is created video schemes. So we, within our schemes, make changes to the bit rate, to the video quality, to audio, and to a few other compression parameters. Now, what you can do is use the slider bar here and choose what is more important to you. So there's a slider here between temporal and spatial. So by temporal, that means if it's important for you to record video, but you want to be able to identify when there is movement in the video. So for example, is it important for you to see a leg twitch? Then you're better off erring on the side and moving this slider to the left, because the video scheme to the left is designed to better detect and display movements within the video. If you're more interested in spatial, let's say, for example, you want to be able to identify, let's say, a facial expression because detail in the picture is more important to you, then you can drag your slider to the right. But if you do that, it means you're going to sacrifice the temporal. So you're basically choosing between being able to see detail more clearly or to be able to see movements. Alright, so temporal is associated with movement, spatial is associated with clarity and detail in the picture. Each time you drag the slider, you're sacrificing one or the other side. As you drag this to the right, you'll see the numbers at the bottom will be changing. So it tells you that as you drag it here, Now a study, an 8-hour study at 200 hertz would be approximately 739 megabytes. All right, so again, as we continue to drag this, if you just look at the bottom of the screen, you'll see the numbers changing. Now, all of these numbers, by the way, you won't see anything going higher than 739 megabytes. And the reason why this is the magic number is because when this feature was initially introduced, it was introduced at a time where people were saving or archiving their studies onto CDs, not DVDs. So DVDs at the time were a little more expensive and people were archiving to CDs. And so at the time it was more important for people to be able to fit an entire study onto a CD. So this is probably one of the reasons why we don't enable this by default, because hard drive space or disk space isn't as expensive as it used to be, and people are now using DVDs where you can store an entire, let's say, 7-hour study with video onto one DVD. All right, so I'm just going to uncheck this. So again, if I left the setting as is and I clicked OK, the next time I start a recording, it will display high quality in live mode, but it will be actually recording in a compressed mode. What this does is that it saves you from having to go back later in review and having to perform additional steps to compress the study that was already recorded. I'm going to uncheck this and click OK. Now, if you are interested after the fact, after a study has been recorded at high quality, and maybe you've looked at the study and there was nothing, let's say, too significant, and the high quality doesn't matter so much to you, and you want to compress it later, these are the steps that you need to take. So you need to go up into Edit, Settings, and you need to go to the Review tab. In the Review tab, if you go down to where it says Video Squeeze, there's an option here that says Enable Video Squeeze during pruning or cropping. So I'm going to check this button. All right, and there's actually a little compression scheme that you can select here, which is similar to what I just showed you. All right, and the default is 2 seconds per frame. So I'm just going to click OK. And now that is checked. Now we've enabled the squeeze function in review mode. So let's go into a study now. All right, so we have a study here. I know there's video recorded because that's what the blue line at the top indicates. All right, so there's my video, pulling up my video window. Okay, just going to close the video. All right, so here is a study with video, and what I want to do is I want to compress the size of my study. Specifically, I want to compress the size of the video. So to do this, I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to jump to the beginning of my study. So I'm going to press the Home button. And I'm going to go up here where it says Edit Clips. All right, and right now I just want to make sure that there are no clips currently defined in our window. I'm going to click the Close button. So I'm going to begin by marking a starting point. All right, so to do that, I'm going to click on the button over here that says Start Marking Clip. All right, and I can just, if you want, you can type something in. And I'm going to press the End button on my keyboard to take me to the end of the study and mark the end of my clip. All right, now I'm going to click on the Edit Clips button. And here is my clip window. And you'll notice the size of the study now is 4.2 gigabytes, or 4,254 megabytes. If you look at the box here, you see a solid square, which indicates that if I were to create a prune study right now, this is going to be the size of the study. If I left-click this once, it changes. It indicates the study will not record at high-quality video. Rather, it's going to record it at a more compressed rate. If you left-click it again, without video, it shows us the size of the study. All right? So if you wanted to compress it, you can click on the compress button here, or just toggle it so you see the half shade. Click on the prune button, and you can just give this a name, video, click OK. So now it's going to create a prune study, which is basically another copy of this study, but only the video will be compressed. It will not be the full size. Now, once you've pruned a study, you will basically have another icon. So here's another study here, and we can tell it's pruned because we see the scissors icon. The scissors icon indicates that it's a pruned study. Look at this one here. It shows us that it's the original study. If you want to adjust your sampling rate because you want to adjust the size of your study, to do that, you'll need to go back into the Wave window. So we go to Programs, Excel Tech, NeuroWorks EEG, and we go up into Edit, Settings. We click on the Acquisition tab, and here is where we can specify what we want our sampling frequency to be. So this particular study, or right now it's set up as to sample at 500 or 512. You can change it or lower it by just selecting one of these options. All right, now this depends on whatever head box you have. So depending on if you've got a Connect Brain Monitor, for example, these are your options. All right, if you have an EMU 40, you have the ability to sample up to 1024. All right, so if you wanted to change your recording sampling frequency, you would just make the change here. Just left-click on it and then click OK. Now, the next time I start a study, it's going to record at 256. So in a 7 or 8 hour study, if the data would probably occupy somewhere between 200 and 300 megabytes at 200 hertz sampling frequency. If you were to double that to 512, basically you can just look at doubling your study size from 200 to 300 megabytes to 600 megabytes just for your data forms. All right, so those are the two parameters that you can adjust to affect the size of your study. I want to just talk about pruning one more time. Let's say you have a very long study, whether it's a sleep study, a 9-hour study, or maybe a 24-hour EEG study. If you want, you can use the pruning function just to identify clips of interest in the software. All right, so to prune, you simply navigate to sections in your study that are of interest, mark a starting point. All right, you can type something in or not, and then continue to scroll until you want to mark the end of your first clip. All right, you're going to continue and mark another starting point. It prompts me for a name if I want to identify what these events are. And then you'll see that the Start button is disabled, enabling the end mark, which means you need to mark an end point now. And I'm just going to continue, mark a starting point, and marking an end point. Now if you go to your Edit Clips button, we see our 3 points. All right, and you'll notice that we still have the option to compress our video here. So if I left-click on this, right now it's a solid square, it's saying that the video is 61 megabytes. Or sorry, that this entire segment will be 61 megabytes. If I left-click on it, you see how it changes to reflect the size based on a compressed scheme. And if I left-click and say no video at all, it'll just be 4 megabytes, which is basically the size of your data. All right, so I can choose a compressed, or I can choose a full option. And each time you click on this, it will make a corresponding change in your size column to indicate what the size will be. Once we are done, we can click the prune button to create just sort of a mini study. Now this one I'll do because this is a shorter clip and it won't take as long. So I'm just going to click OK. And it's now going to create a separate study record, containing only these 3 segments. Click OK, click Close, and if we go back into our window now, we will see a smaller version. There's our mini. Okay, so here's a copy of our prune study mini. When it comes to pruning, you can manually create start and end points. I'm just going to unmark all these clips. All right, you can manually create these start and end points, or you can use the auto-clip function. All right, so I'm going to just demonstrate the auto-clip function, but I'd like to use an EEG study instead. So I'm going to take a short EEG study. Let's take this one here. Okay. And if we look at this study, I'm just deleting some of these events because I just want to shorten the time that it's going to take to prune the study here. So if you have an EEG study and you're marking XL events, you can equate this to sleep as well. If you had a sleep study and you had all your respiratory events, for example, identified, so you've got your events identified in the left-hand column, you can go up into the Edit Clip button, click on Auto Clips, and we can create a clipping rule based on XL events. I want the auto clipping function to be performed on everything that is checked here. So I'm going to uncheck this one and just keep this one here checked, XL event. If this were a sleep study, for example, I could go in here and I could select sleep event and then basically specify some type of a sleep event. So I could say auto clip all of the segments containing obstructive apnea. So in any case, I'm going to stick with this example. And here you can decide whether or not to include video. You can set the amount of minutes that you want to capture before the actual event, so a before and after. So let's say you want to record 2 minutes prior to where the event is located and 3 minutes after. And then you click Mark Clips. It identifies 4 clips for us. And again, you can choose to compress your video, reducing the size of the study, click Prune, and then clicking OK, and it again will create another prune study for you. And that is using the auto clipping function. We've got a number of studies in our database window. So there are some studies in here that I would like to simply permanently delete. If you look at the bottom here, right now it's saying it's listing 13 studies. 13 studies of 13 studies. So I've got some additional files in here, some small files, but I do not want them to appear in the database at all. So I'm going to right-click on this, and I'm going to select the Permanently Delete option. Here it's going to prompt me for the password. So as long as you are using XL Security and you are authorized to delete studies, you can enter your password in here, click OK, all right? And it has now deleted that study record completely from our window. If you look at the bottom here, it's saying it's showing 12 studies now instead of 13. Okay? Now before you delete anything, you might want to archive your study. In order to archive a study, let's first archive to DVD. Alright, so what I'm going to do is, I'm going to open my disk tray, and I'm just going to put in a blank DVD. I'm inserting it into my computer. Studies that have not been archived, all right, if we look in this disk column, studies that have not been archived will have nothing showing in this particular column. Studies that have been archived will display the disk icon. Okay, so I put in a blank DVD. I'm going to right-click on the Start button and go to Explore. What I'm going to do now, right-click on my CD-ROM here, or my disk, and click on the Drag to Disk option. There is a format option, but this is Windows formatting. I'm going to select the Drag to Disk option, and it opens up a RockShield program used for formatting disks. I'm going to click on the menu icon and click on Format Disk. It brings up a Format Options window. If you want, you can give it a label. It's not important that you do so, but I'm just going to click OK and accept the default. And now the disk in the drive is being prepared or formatted. You'll notice that when I right-clicked on this CD-ROM drive in the first place, there was an option that said Format, and and then beneath that it said Drag to Disk. Depending on what version of software you have, in some cases the Format option might be acceptable. So it's important that when you get the system from us, that you find out whether or not you can use the format option that's included with Windows, or if you need to use the Roxio version, for example, or whatever other software was provided on your system to format your disk. So the question becomes, what do I need to do to format the disk on my computer? It's either right-clicking and selecting the formatting option, or you might need to use whatever DVD or disk program was supplied on your machine. Okay, when this window displays the contents of my D drive, I know that the disk is now ready to be written to. So I'm just going to minimize this and go to our database window, and I'm going to select the archive option. By default, it browses automatically to our disk drive. And here you can decide whether or not to include video. All right, it displays the total study size with the video. All right, tells us how much space we have in our DVD. The space required is only 433, and it tells us how much space will be available afterwards. You can check or uncheck this, and now it's telling us the study size will be 44 megabytes. All right. When you're ready, you just click on the Archive button. If you want, you can archive more than one study at a time. Hold the Control button and left-click on the studies you want to archive. I'm going to select these 3 studies. I'm going to click the Archive button. It displays all of our studies, and I can decide again whether or not to include the video. So let's say I won't include the video on these 2, but I'll keep it on these ones. Click on the Archive button, and now it is burning the studies to disk. All right, so once this operation is done, if the study has never been archived before, like these 2 here, we will see, or we should see, these 2 disk icons appearing next to the study in this column. We've chosen to archive this study again. Now there's an icon that appears there which simply indicates someone has already used the archive function before to create a copy onto a disk. When you click on the archiving button, and once it's done, you get a message that pops up. If you want, you can click on the Label Details button. And what this does is that it automatically opens Microsoft Word, and it creates a label for you containing the patient name, the study date, and an EEG number. So if you want, you can add some additional information in here. You can just edit this. If you're storing information in a cabinet, let's say, and your cabinets are labeled, you can then print out this document. All right, you can label your CD, and then with the label that you've printed out, you can put the CD into your label or into a disk sleeve. And if you are maintaining, let's say, file folders, you may even want to insert this or keep this with a particular file folder or not. All right, I'm going to click the Close button, and we see that the disk icons have been added. Now, typically, you may find that your workflow involves you archiving a study to a disk, or maybe not. If you're recording to a server, your server may be getting backed up. And so some people may be archiving, some people may not. If you are archiving and later, because you need to free up some disk space, you may be interested in creating some disk space by removing the video files or the data files associated with a particular study, again, just to create some space. I showed you before the permanently delete option. The permanently delete option, like I said, will permanently remove the study record. We had 13, now we're showing 12. The other option is to use the purge function. So the purge function, what this does is that it allows us to delete the contents of a study, but still maintaining a record in the database so that we know later that this person came in to have a study done. I want to create space on my hard drive, and so I'm going to select one of these studies here. Let's select this one here. And I know that the raw data exists on the system because of this icon right here. All right, it's a little hard drive icon. And I know that the video exists on the system because this icon is here. All right. And actually, I'm going to go to this study here because I want to do something with reports. This icon here simply indicates that a report has been generated. Okay, so let's go to this one here. So I want to purge this study. So we're displaying 12 studies. What I want to do now is click the Purge option. And the purge option gives us three choices. A, we can purge all study files, which means delete the video, delete the data, and delete the report. Only leave a record that this person existed and that this person came in for a sleep study. When I say a record, I mean only keep the information that is stored in this window here, in these three windows. Okay? That's what I mean by keeping the record. So, I'm going to click on the purge option. So if I want, I can delete all three of these. If I want, I can purge only the video files, but leave the data and the reports. In other words, keep your data signals. All right? Now, we talked before, data signals, 8-hour study, about 200-300 megabytes. Video, you're looking at about another 3 gigs. You also have a third option that says, purge the study files, including video, but leave the reports. So this option would delete video, delete the data, but keep the reports. Now, reports, relatively speaking, do not occupy a lot of file size or a lot of space. So what we found was that a number of people used to archive all the study files, but then later, whenever they wanted to retrieve a report, they would have to go back and get the CD just to look at the report. They're not looking at the study or the video, they're just looking at the report. So this is when we added this third option that provides people with the ability to just keep the reports, because we find ourselves accessing the report once in a while and we don't want to have to go back to the disk. So this is probably one of the more popular choices. As long as you have the permission to purge on your system, you can type in your password. We're going to click OK. When I click OK, I just want you to observe these icons here. So right now it's going to, and it put it at the bottom here. So it's deleted the hard drive icon and deleted the video. So if I try to open this study right now, it's going to say unable to open the study because it has no data file. If you wanted to bring the study back, put your disk in, and you can click on the import button, select from files. We would browse to our disk. Now, I browse to the disk. The study is there. I select it. I click import, and it will now transfer the study back onto our machine. Okay. So there's our study, and if I try to review now, it will be available. I'm not going to open it up for review right now. All right? So the studies that we purged here, the total number of studies, it has not changed, but the data files are gone. And again, using the purge option allows you to keep a record that the study existed, or that the person came into the lab. I just showed you importing. Now, when you're done, by the way, archiving a study, and you're ready to eject your CD, I'm going to press the eject button on my computer. And you may be prompted with a window from your CD or your DVD burning software. It'll provide you with some options. Now, I'm using the drag to disk software here, and there's an option here that says leave the disk open, use the disk on this computer on computers with compatible drag to disk versions. So I would leave the disk open normally if I wanted to burn or copy additional studies to the disk because there's still space. But once I'm done, or if I'm no longer copying studies to that disk, or I want this disk to be, I want to be able to use this disk in any other machine that may not have the drag to disk option, for example, I will select the close the disk option. Check close the disk, and then click the eject button, and the disk software will perform one last operation to just make the disk readable in other DVD drives. So if you were to transfer this disk and put it onto another computer that has the NeuroWorks or SleepWorks software, and maybe it's a newer version, you should be able to import the study because you have prepared the disk to make it readable for other computers that do not have this drag to disk software. Your exporting options are available not at the top, but by right-clicking on a study record. So again, I'm going to select a shorter study. And I'm going to show you a couple of options that are available for exporting. So first of all, I'm going to right-click and I'm going to select the export option. So if I wanted to export, and let's say I just want to make a copy of this study. I want to make a copy of this study because maybe I want to provide someone with a copy of the study who has the ExcelTech, SleepWorks, or NeuroWorks software. They're not connected or they're not part of our database, but I want them to be able to see the study. So in this case, I want to make a copy and copy it to a file location. All right, so I'm just going to click the Browse button, and I'm going to connect my USB drive, which I have connected here. So I'm going to browse to my USB drive and click OK. And I have some additional options here at the top. If I want, I can click on one of these options here. So if I click the de-identify option, what it will do is simply utilize all of these X's here. So if you had, let's say you had Barack Obama as a patient, when you made a copy of the study or exported a copy, the name Barack Obama will not appear. Instead, you will see BXXX, OXXX. All right, so all of these studies here have been de-identified. So if you want to de-identify, select the de-identify option. If you don't care and you want to retain a copy of the original name, then just keep the copy option here. All right, so I'm just going to click de-identify, and again, you have the choice to do with video or not. I click export, and it's going to copy it to my USB location. So if we go to my USB drive right now, we will see a copy of the study that we did there. Let's go back, let's right-click, and let's select Export again. If we want, you have another option to export to an EDF format. So if I select EDF, I need to browse to location. So I'm going to browse to my location again. I'm going to browse to the folder that I created. All right, and you click the export option. And so if we go to our hard drive or to our Windows Explorer and look at our USB drive, we'll see a copy of the EDF file. If you are using an EDF, whatever EDF software you're using, in this case I'm just opened up Persist, and I'm going to click File, Open, and I'm going to browse to my USB drive, and there is my EDF file. Click Open, and there's your EDF file displayed in your EDF viewer. We'll close this. You have another option to export your study to a database. If you have multiple databases, so in this case, if I go up to database here, I have a few different databases here. I have one database called Adult. So I'm switching to that database, and right now there are no studies in there. So I'm going to switch back to my MSR Hospital database. I'm going to select the study. I'm going to right-click and select Export. And this time I'm going to select the database option. For this, you'll need to browse to your NeuroWorks folder. And within your NeuroWorks folder, there will be a folder that corresponds to the database name. So if I want to export to a database called Adult, I need to locate the Adult folder, double-click on it, and there is a file type called DSN, all right, which is basically the name of your database. So I'm going to select this, click Open, and selecting this adult.dsn is basically a way to select or designate the database you want to export it to. And then I click on the Export button. And if we switch to our adult database, we see a copy of the study there now. Finally, I'm going to right-click and click on the Export option. There is another option in here called Natus Data Share. The Natus Data Share provides you with the ability to export a copy of your study to a USB drive or to a disk, and then give that disk to someone else who does not have the software installed on their computer, but they would still like to view the study. All right. So if you select the Natus Data Share option, what it will do, export it to in a particular format that will make it available on another computer. So I will select the Natus Data Share and browse Natus Data Share. All right, select your directory. So what this can be a disk, for example. Doesn't matter if it's a disk or USB. Just browse to the location and then click Export. Now, when you export the study in the Natus Data Share format, what it does is that it exports a copy of the actual data files. So remember those files I showed you in the beginning. And it also exports a mini installation file, which is basically enough files to install a viewer on the other person's machine that does not have the software. All right, so for all intents and purposes, it will look identical to having the review software on your machine. The only difference is you won't be able to make any kind of annotations or notes. Now, once you have your study, so I'm just going to go to this folder just so you can have a look and see what it looks like. All right, so these are the contents of your Natus Data Share. All right, you've got the study data, which is basically these files here, which I explained to you in the beginning. But in addition to the actual data files, you have some setup files and a number of other files that are responsible and allow you to install a mini version or reader onto your computer. Once you've got the Natus Data Share, let's say you've copied it onto a disk, you take the disk, you take it to your computer, and I'm just showing you a video here. Take it to your computer, and you pop the disk in, pop it into your computer. So if this is your screen's laptop, this is what will happen. There'll be an auto-run facility that will automatically just take you through a couple of prompts. If this is the first time you're using Natus Data Share, it's going to install the viewer automatically. Once you're done, you go to the Start button, click Programs, Natus Data Share. You select the Wave option. And that will open a window where you can go to File, Review. You browse to where your study files are located on your disk or USB drive. And there you will see a copy of your study. You can also choose to open the study as an EEG or as a sleep study. So you have, as long as you're licensed for both, you have the option to display the study in both formats. Now the video, as I was talking, the video may or may not have been in sync with what I was saying. So I hope that the video was descriptive enough for you to get the gist of it. Okay, that is all for now. I'm just going to look at my chat window here to see if any questions came through, and I will attempt to answer them. In the meantime, so I'm just going to look at the questions right now and just see what types of questions have come through. So one of the questions is, the user here, they don't archive to a disk, as more and more people are not doing. Rather, they are archiving to a USB drive. And they just add comment on that. So the archive function, when this was initially created, again, this was back in the day when people were archiving to disk. And archiving generally meant burning it to a disk, or even a tape backup. But as USB drives have become more and more popular, you can still use the archive function to denote that the operation of backing up your study has been done. Using the archive function is really the same thing as using the export function, in that you are creating a copy and you get to choose whether or not you want to copy it onto a USB drive or a disk. Really the only difference with respect to exporting and archiving is when you archive, you get the icon, the visual icon. With exporting, you don't know if it's been exported or not. So what I would suggest is, if you want to have a way to keep track of when a study has been backed up, you can use the archive function, because that has a very specific meaning to you. It means that someone has actually performed the operation. It's sort of a visual flag to indicate that that step in your lab's workflow has been done. If you wanted to, you could also create a filter in the database window to display studies that have or have not been archived, so that someone can perform that function, let's say at the end of the week, or however often you perform the archive function. All right, someone had asked the question, is there a way to share the study in a general format for a physician, for example, who needs a copy but doesn't have the Excel text software? And I think we answered that with the Natus data share. All right, so using the Natus data share, that would provide them with the ability to look at the software, or to look at the study without having the Excel text software. Once you've installed the Natus data share files the first time, the next time, let's say you want to continue sending additional studies, you would continue to export in the Natus data share format. When the person takes the USB stick or the disk and puts it on their machine, rather than running the auto installation, they would simply go to Start, Programs, select the Wave option, like I showed you previously, and go up into File, select the Review option, and then basically just browse to the study on their USB drive or disk. When archiving studies, is the video compressed automatically? No. So the compressed option, or compressed squeezing the video, the option, it is something, if you recorded a study in high quality video and you want to compress it after the fact, you have to create a pruned study, because it's only within the pruned window where you can select or toggle that video button and select the compressed scheme. All right, so unlike the archive window, when you left-click in that video camera box, it does not provide you with the option at the time of archiving to compress the video. It sounds like a good idea. Unfortunately, it's not an option right now. So if you want to compress the video after the fact, you do have to create a prune study and then compress it within the Edit Clips window. If you want the video to be compressed automatically, then the only way to do that is during the recording. So that means when you start a study, you will be seeing high quality video, but as it's recording in a compressed format. And to do that change, that's what I showed you towards the beginning of the presentation, where you went into NeuroWorks EEG, File, Customize Video, and then you selected a Video tab. There was a Squeeze Video option. You would need to check that, and this is where you select a balance between temporal and spatial settings. All right. When you check that, when you enable that Squeeze Video option, the software will record in a compressed format right off the bat. All right. So if you do that, it's fine. It just means that you'll never be able to go back and recover the high quality video. So if you're comfortable sacrificing the high quality video, you can use that as an option, and it will save you from having to go through the pruning steps later. So I have a question here regarding burning. After exporting the file to a CD with the Natus data share, if we hit the eject button, it usually takes 1 or 2 minutes. Sometimes you hit the eject button and the CD pops up immediately, but then this cannot be read on other computers. So if you recall, when I first when we archived the study to disk, then I pressed the eject button. When I pressed the eject button, the DVD burning software, a window popped up. All right, and it popped up and it gave us 2 options. So one option was, do you want to leave the session open, or do you want to leave this disk in a format so that you can burn additional studies to it? And if you click OK, then I would expect the CD to pop out immediately. If you click the other option, which is close the session, which means I want you to make this CD readable on other machines, then the software would take additional time, a minute or 2, to basically close the session. When I say close the session, that means the software needs to perform some additional recording of information onto that disk, so that when you eject it and insert that disk on any other machine, that any other machine can read the information. All right. From what I can see, there are no more questions. I hope I was able to answer your questions, and I hope I was able to convey how a number of these operations and functions work today. If you have any questions, you're always welcome to email me. My email address is on the screen there. And I want to thank you very much for your time today, for registering, for your feedback, and for submitting your questions. I look forward to interacting with you again. Have a great day. Have a great week. Thank you very much. This concludes our session.